Afraid of your own power. Hmm. I remember when I was really needing a change in perspective for myself, and I needed to um, I needed to regain my sense of my own power. I read a book by Tony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within, and it had a very particular spin on personal power. And he even had a series of interviews around personal power, and it was really helpful for me. Um, what I will say is, in the intervening 30 years since I read that book, I've come to become a lot more trauma informed. For example, um, you can encourage someone to express their power, but if the only way that they've experienced power is power over them, and abuse that has come with powerful emotions like anger, rage, um, it's mm, can even be unhelpful to tell people, well, you just need to get past your fear and express your power because it doesn't honor the journey and where they are. And so, one of the reasons that we do these real skills workshops and we use emotional tools and what we've learned about trauma is so that the urge to be able to express what matters to you with oomph, with energy, with power, um, gets encouragement and opportunity, and also recognition that it's not that you've just been self sabotaging. It's not that you've just been standing in your own way, that you just haven't stood on the chair with Tony and go, now I am the voice. I will lead, not follow. Now, those are the first two lines. I still remember them. I actually know the rest of it too. Um, but that implies that there's a leader and a follower. And one of the things that we do with Thriving Now is it's my deepest intention is that although I am the facilitator, I use my energy, my resource, my power to intentionally create a space that is what I want and what I share and what I invite others to. Um, I Leader is not the model for me. Kathy and I were talking about how if you want to do something that's deeply personal and that I'm just going to do it, just do it. Like if you want to be able to run or climb or do something that really doesn't co-create with anyone else, there's not a whole lot of permission involved or needed. There's a certain avenue that we go through emotionally. There may be beliefs that you have about like, oh, I can't do this. Who am I to write a song, for example? But then for those of us who want to co-create, where we are not only aware of the ecosystem we share with others, but we want to be mindful of it. And I shared that in the newsletter article this morning about context. I want to, and I do, sit down at my new keyboard with the weighted keys, and I let myself, my own personal power, express itself through my body, my heart to hands. When I really get into it, it doesn't necessarily sound like anything that you would go to a concert to hear, but it's me expressing my power. If in my demand for my freedom to express my power, I ignore my kids and family sleeping. If I live in an apartment, I ignore the people around me. on one level, it is expressing my power, but it's doing so um, without awareness and tending to context. Um, and honestly, a lot of the way that I saw power being used when I was growing up, and in many contexts, it is somebody has power and they use it, whether it impacts other people consensually or not. I'm a dad, and you don't have to be a terrible father to run into this even in your own home. A child can want to do something and be using their power to try to get it, their emotional power, whether it's their disappointment. My daughter's not even 2 years old, and she knows how to express disappointment like, and it's, oh, I don't want to disappoint you. Yeah, no, I don't. Or she goes down in child's pose and just kind of puts her head on the ground and cries. And I'm like, I know how to do that. But there was a point in my life where that was too much for my mom. I could feel it in my nervous system that my honest expression of my emotional power, my power of expressing my disappointment, my power of expressing my frustration, the power of expressing all of those things, it was too much for her. And if I stayed too much for her, it was not going to be good for me and my brother. And so I believe that from very early on, my mother was not abusive about those things. She is and was a very understanding person about that. And I was suppressed. I also have clients who, and even with my father, like if he was in a certain state and I was even just a little frustrated with him, that was not good. It was not safe. We would be out on a boat, he would be drunk, and if he got angry and I disagreed with anything that he said, even slightly, it was not good. Tap, tap, tap. I would be open to hearing from you in the chat if there's anything that's coming up for you about like how power has been in your life. What is it that you've seen, witnessed, felt on your body or in your body about what it means to be powerful? Because we're touching. I'm intentionally touching on things that are intimate and aware in my own body about how, we contract our range, how much we can be repulsed by power over us. You know, I remember when a new chief executive came into a company. I've typically been self-employed because tending to myself is really important, and being able to express myself. But I was working for 9 years when my older children were growing up. It was just the right thing to do. And we had a CEO that I was good friends with. He had hired me. We were in the mission together, and he brought in a new chief executive officer. And this guy, wow, he just used his power over. Instead of me being able to navigate the needs of being a parent and a chief technology officer, he was like, no, you're going to be at this meeting. Well, it didn't matter that my child had a championship soccer game. That was not. He used his power over me to dictate into my life how I was going to be, rather than co-creating and seeking ways so that we can maximize the power coming together. So, powerful can be overbearing and intimidating, especially being an empathetic child. I became hyper vigilant and guarded. Another person wrote, in my family, we divided up strong emotions. I was allowed to be sad, but not angry. My sister was allowed to be angry and melt down. Trying to get my power to feel my anger prompted a super meltdown from my sister, and I am 72 years old. Now that's a rigid family structure. and an attempted use of power over. And I appreciate you bringing this up because it goes to context. And I'll get to the hand raised in just a second, so be ready. So families can create these contexts where, this is what we can handle, or you're allowed to be sad, but not angry. And it's a bit like a game. It's real life, but okay, so let's call it a we space. It's a we space where the limitations of the different people and their needs can often get, like, we assert this is what's allowed. And whether it's said specifically or not, this is just the way that space works. And sometimes it's for, I usually believe, I won't say always believe, but I go seeking, is there an intelligence there? And for example, if somebody totally dysregulates around anger, like that's their nervous system can't handle it, their trauma, whatever, their neurodiversity, if they just can't handle a particular vibration, then the simplest thing is to say, well, that's not allowed toward that person. My dad could not handle disrespect in his kind of archaic way of looking at it, but that was one of his things. Dysregulated if you were disrespectful to him. You could be disrespectful to him, you just had to be sly about it so he didn't find out. So like the we space of my dad's family was one where a lot of people did a lot of things that were not good behind everyone's back, and there was no sharing. Mother thought she had power over me. Well, mothers often do when we're children. When you come home, you're going to do the dishes, even if you aren't here for dinner, a minor thing, but an example. Right. So again, like the power over model that I'd love to make archaic, completely archaic, but we're animals still. And we don't have as strong structures around power with. And in my family, there was definitely a power structure where if dad or mom said something was going to be done, it had to be done, or what would happen? Violence, punishment, and the like. So these are things that really make power seem like a sucky thing, especially if your roots are in being an empathetic child and seeing gosh, you really have to use up a lot of energy just to navigate other people's power. Why would I want to inflict that on anyone else? So covered some landscape there. I'm going to ask you to unmute, Peter. Did that work?
Okay, here we go. Thank you, Rick.
Hold on just a second. I'm currently... Okay, great. Go ahead.
Thanks a lot. I can relate to a lot what you said. I think for me, growing up, I only experienced power over model. Most of it from my father. And he was like making rules which we had to obey, but he didn't. So he didn't choose to lead by example. He led by brute force, basically. My mother showed me that she had power over me by when I didn't comply, telling to my father what I did wrong. So,
and what would happen then?
Ended up, well, I got punished when I
physically. So I was. If you want to share what the physical punishment?
Yeah. Okay. And verbal abuse, if you want to call it like this. I've worked most of my adult life, telling it from 20 years on to process my childhood and my youth, to not being stuck in that. So I kind of made peace with my history, so it doesn't work me up today. So in a way, I started early in my life to do some kind of trauma work without calling it like it. I started with meditation and later with all
But right
kinds of
now,
stuff.
how comfortable are you with your power? What brings you to
That's
afraid of my
where I
power?
want to go. I realized my first way of discovering my own power was anger. It still is a lot of my go-to when I feel powerless. My knee-jerk reaction is getting angry to feel less powerless. So the first glimpse of power for me is getting angry. So whenever I'm getting angry, kind of self-conscious, I realize, oops, something's going on there and on the powerless side. And when I was in a so-called leadership position at work,
Yeah.
I took a rebellious approach. I used my power over, not for repeating the model I got from my father or from other leaders in the company. I used it to protect people, and I figured out that this was amazing. If you use power to protect others rather than punish them, then they blossom. Then they shine in ways amazing. It's really so that is my positive experience with power. But I needed to use a rebel stance of the power model. Almost the contrary, not using power to manipulate people, but using my power to say, you do what you do. You're allowed to make mistakes, and when something goes wrong, it's my fault.
There you
And
go.
I had an amazing results with that, and not just for them, even for me, because I felt at ease at work. I knew that they had my back in a way because I had theirs. But in every aspect of that, this was, and so whenever I'm in a situation like this nowadays, I use this kind of model because it serves me so well. Like when with my cat, I have a cat. Or sometimes I have friends who have dogs. I use this energy, protective energy, and I get great feedback from an animal. Very simple, just not telling him what to do, but protecting him and while he's doing, and then they behave miraculously well. Some people say, "How do you do that with that dog?" It's simple, protect him. So
Yeah, and I want to say that like the protection energy where what you're doing is you create a container which is safer for the people that are in your space.
Yeah, exactly.
And that I'm noticing over the last years that there's a continuing evolution of that because protection is certainly helpful. Our skin is protective of us. And in a role where there's a hierarchy that could inflict, the person who is resilient enough and strong enough in their power to be able to say, look, it's my fault. They essentially are like a lightning rod. If there are things that are a lightning rod protects the barn and the hay and the horses and the animals and other thing because it is designed energetically with enough power and structure to be able to handle energy and even intense energy in that structure. One of the things that I'm looking at and I want to cultivate as a real skill for thriving is this idea that there are people that want to create a we space. A we space is one that is designed to be shared. It's not just about tending to me. It's about tending with others. And we're going to have roles and use our energy and use our power to facilitate the well-being of each of us, all of us. It's not a sacrifice. It's not and within regular hierarchies, sometimes that's just not the best you can do, which is extraordinary. Thank you for sharing it. Is to create a little world, of the people that work for you, where you have power over them, but you're actually using that power to create a protective energy that allows them to flourish more. Like a greenhouse in a hostile environment can protect the growth and flourishing of whatever's inside.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things we're looking at is as we source other spaces and join other spaces, especially if we're not even necessarily the one with the role that could be construed as being power over, how do we continue that? Like you volunteering today, sharing your wisdom is exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm riffing on it with the wisdom and the things that I'm noticing are important around facilitation and WeSpace and between us and everyone who's listening and everyone who will listen to this, what we're doing is we're taking this idea of, look, you came from a place where power was violent and threatening and dictatorial, authoritarian at least, and you said, listen, that's not the way that I want to use my power. What do I do? And you've continued to evolve it, and people notice. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Can I add one thing? For me, I realized while I was a kid, it's something you said triggered that memory. Of course, I ran some sabotage against the authoritarian power of my father. And there was competition, like who would get his nice face rather than the punishment. And I realized that this crazy competition and this sabotage is draining the energy of the system. And and I had my department, and I had objectives to meet, and I don't claim to be a good person. I just claimed that I said, well, if I want to meet my objective, this other model won't work. Because they never give you enough resources in terms of human resource, how it's called in that type of language. So if you work with what you've got, make sure that people have the freedom, and this is a key element in such a space to create freedom, to not compete. I had a simple rule. I like to apply certain rules which are the same for everybody, by the way, not like in my father's world. When people have an idea, I worked in Japan. I said, I brought that from Japan. If somebody has an idea and if it's minor, nobody has the right to squash the idea because they want to criticize it. I said, the only way to discuss ideas if you have a better idea, which not only solves 1%, but 5% maybe, or 2%. But if that's not the case, every idea is welcome. So I heard people speak up who in other environments, I knew them from other environments, never opened their mouths because they were afraid that whenever they say it's not important enough, not big enough, not creative enough, not inspiring enough, and in this space, they were able to talk because they had the freedom to give an idea which only improved 1%. And down the road, they gave ideas which improved to 50% because they learned how to talk.
Thank you.
And not like in my home model where nobody was allowed to talk except the big guy. And as I said, I always said I have a master's degree in anger because I really know all the keys on this keyboard, which is called anger. I told about people, if somebody's angry with you on the phone, and you have that a lot of abuse on the phone in this world I work, I said, give them to me. I know how to deal with angry people because I am one of them. So I listened to them. I said, talk to me, and it worked out like this. So
Peter, thank you. I want to bring us back to the subject. I appreciate you talking about anger. It's one of the things that because it impacts our feeling of power, we have the Thriving Now Center. I would enjoy engaging with you around what you've learned about anger, what it means to you, and where you're moving it. We did a workshop on turning anger into oomph, and I'd like to continue that exploration. How
Sorry,
people
I could make it because of the time difference at the time.
No problem. The recording is out there on thrivingnow.net.
Yeah,
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and mute you for right now. Feel free to. So, how we've experienced anger as punishment, I think that's one of the things that we could do some tapping on if you all are open to that. Someone shared, and there was a lot of people, there were some people that agreed. My mother went as far, I'm going to do that after the tapping on anger. Okay. We use EFT tapping. If you're not familiar with it, thrivingnow.com/tapping. Even though anger is powerful, it has been used against me. And that's been really hard. And it's made me afraid of power. Even my own power. Even though power has hurt me, I'm here exploring other ways to use my power to create safety and thriving for myself and others. Top of the head. I've been scared of anger. Eyebrow. Their anger was scary. Side of the eye. Their anger was violent. Under the eye. Their anger was horrible. Under the nose. They took it out on me. Chin. I saw them take it out on others. Collarbone. If that's power, I don't want anything about it. Under the arm. But anger doesn't have to be used that way. And I'm grateful to have heard that. Top of the head. I'm grateful that I've modeled it at times too. So it's useful sometimes as you're going through a workshop to write down anger. How afraid am I of the power of my anger? 0 to 10. Now, not then, but now, how afraid are you if your power comes up and it's got anger to it, how afraid are you of that? And whatever the number is, for example, if you're afraid of it at a 10, that's really hard to navigate the world because anger is a clear form of of hurt, for example. If somebody intentionally steps on your foot or pushes you out of the way, there's going to be a natural energetic response to that, which is no, that's not okay. There are lots of places for that. But if you're afraid of your anger coming up at a 10, then your nervous system and your energy system will be suppressing it. If you're afraid of your anger and I think that there are things that we can do to acknowledge that, yeah, I suppress it because I don't feel safe. Okay. I suppress it because I don't want to cause harm to myself or others. I don't want to get in a fight. I'm not ready to be in a fight. I don't want to be in a fight. I'm devoted to nonviolence, even around my boundaries, wherever possible. We can do that. And hold on just a second. So that's if you're afraid at a 6, then I believe that one of the things is that you get angry. And you want to continue to channel that anger in a way that is true to yourself, your own protection, survival, that acknowledges that sometimes, not saying, not doing anything is the way to survive. And sometimes it's just what your you're ready for or not ready for. And that's true for me. Like I have a very powerful fire in me that can come out. And so like mine's a 6. And I can feel that what I want to continue to do is to channel that into a pause, for example, a powerful pause, one where I go, okay, I calm, I get clear, I calm my over it contains the fire in a way that says, I feel my feelings and I'm going to consciously respond in a way that's right for me. It can be an angry word. It can be a profanity. And I also want the capacity to turn and walk away. I want the capacity to let it go because the anger kind of stepped on something that really isn't that important to me. I may have other options, like, I can just go to another room here. I don't have to get angry. Anger told me it's time for me to do something, but I could just pick up my stuff and go to the other room with calm confidence. Ooh, that's what the workshop's about, calm confidence. People that are afraid of their anger at a 0 are kind of like the person who's afraid of fire at a 0. Like, does that make sense? And maybe it's like afraid is not the right word, but the fear transforms into a deep respect that this is a powerful energy that can warm a hearth and it can burn down a forest. So our power can do great good. It can be used for protection. It can be used to assert on behalf of someone who's vulnerable. It can be used to set a boundary that, no, this must stop, or you don't get to be in relationship with me. It can do a lot of things. It has a power to it. So I believe that part of the skill here is knowing that our power is wanting to move to a place where it can be confidently used in a ways that are congruent with what matters to us, our integrity and the like, and doesn't necessarily flare out. And also, like as someone said, if you express your anger, because that is absolutely what is needed and chosen, and your sibling goes cuckoo brains over it, that you can say, listen, I expressed my feelings. I stayed on my side of the fence. I said, when this happens, I feel angry. And when this doesn't happen, I feel like there's something wrong. I get angry about it. And if somebody else dysregulates, you have a power of allowing their feelings to be theirs. Even as an empath, that is takes decades of practice for me. I've met people that get it a lot faster. I hope it for all of us, but it's a reality that our personal power is. It's just important to human flourishing as fire, and also used respectfully. Fire, water, steel, earth, like our power is essential for our flourishing and flourishing with one another. And the conscious use of power. If it's in our primitive brain, how can we, with some savvy, calm it out of our primitive brain and bring it into our heart, our core, so that we can stand and be with confidence. Like anger usually does come from either my primitive brain or up from my core, as in, like, this matters to me, or it's like, this makes me angry because it's not what I want. It's not what I expected. It's not like, those are two different kinds of power, and the savvy of being able to move with that. So I want to get to a couple other chat messages, because this is also like the power. My mother went as far as clearly defining me by telling me that I was giving, calm, and good-natured. she reminded me of this expectation daily. I felt I needed to live up to her way of defining me. I was unable to fully express my true nature with my family. We see this as, people get defined as the smart one. People get defined as the pretty one. People get defined as the good-natured one, the easygoing one. Emotional freedom. What I'm offering around emotional freedom is that the good-natured one can also be human. And yeah, if they do something that's out of integrity, that they can clean it up, but we're not forced into being something. And there's a power of the people around us to like see us and see us in certain ways that don't necessarily reflect like who we are in our wholeness. People that are really good at being outgoing, for example, there's a power in being outgoing, but if everyone is defining you, and I'm tapping because, I am not always outgoing. Anyone here always outgoing? And I'm not always an introvert either, so if people in the neighborhood knew me as outgoing, they may not oh, you're so outgoing. And sometimes like that to me is part of the power of, oh, you are so creative. Yeah, sometimes I love it when that expresses through me. It's definitely a part of me. I believe that one of the ways that we get comfortable with our power is by embracing our range. It's like, oh, you're so calm and confident. Yeah, I've made a lot of shifts around that, and sometimes I'm not. I'm okay with that. It gets it starts building, and people will do this with the kids. Oh, you're so this, you're so that. Yeah, sometimes, often. Yeah, that's a really core part of their nature, and not all of who they are. And that I think goes to what Dieter had shared too. Like, one of the things that I'm aware of, and I know that other empaths can be aware of, and you don't even have to be an empath to be aware of this, is how we get projected on, and that like, I'm noticing that one of the things that if you want to start a particular kind of work, it may be that that's going to accentuate a part of your power, right? And there can be a feeling like, well, if I start doing work with people to help them get past their artistic blocks, I'll use that. Let's say you want to be a coach and you start doing that. There can be this feeling like, well, if I express my power, which I assume if you have the desire that you really could help people get through their blocks, co-creating is wonderful, that you might feel like, oh no, if I use my power that way, then I lose the freedom of having blocks myself. So afraid of power can come up that way. Let me take a look at what else is there. Yeah, stops you from shining. Thank you for bringing that up, because I wrote about that. So I'm gonna, again, like, we can tap while people. I listen to podcasts and tap, even though they're not tappers. I listen to podcasts and tap. And again, like if something's coming up strongly for you that you want to volunteer to share the facilitation, the co-creating, feel free to raise your hand. I want to talk about shining. So, because this goes to the freight of power. So there are experiences that we've had where we were doing something where we felt powerful. What happened in those cases? We're shining, we're glowing. If you've ever seen someone who's really in their flow, they could be alone working at a piece of art, but if you were able to get the energetic snapshot, like they're shining, it could be like the soft glow of this wondrous energy that they're vibing with. It could be like rainbows and sparkles shooting out from their everything. When I say shining, I mean you're in your artistry. What happened? What happened? What did they do? And did that feel nourishing to you? So, if it felt really good to do a piece of art and somebody sees it and says, "What's that shit?" You were shining, and somebody else sees it and they add energy, which is like, I don't know about you, but I feel that if somebody said something like that. So there's the inherent experiences, the associations we have. If we're encouraged in certain ways, if we're punished in certain ways, if we're ridiculed, bullied, these are things that in the landscape of being afraid of power, those traumas, if they're still in your craw, will impact how free you feel to express your power in that way. As a practice, if I'm going to want to do something, for example, I was gifted an iPad that someone wasn't using, and there was a drawing app that I wanted to use. As soon as I picked it up, I was flooded by memories of negative feedback I got. Some of it I couldn't even put words to about drawing. And I just sat there with the plastic stylus pencil in my hand, and I just tapped, and I just made a heart on the screen. And the first one I didn't like. It didn't speak to me. And so I used the undo, something I didn't have back then. And I did it again, and I liked it. I was like, oh, I like that. And I stopped there. So as we're reclaiming our power, noticing what comes up for us as we start to move in a particular direction, not in a general way, but like saying hello to someone. Okay. Like if you think about, like, I like to be friendlier with people, just a little, like I just turn up the volume a little bit on my friendliness. Well, what's going to happen? Well, someone may ignore me. How do I feel about that? I feel rejected. If that's an 8, you won't be friendly, but you could start with tapping on that, the power of being friendly and open and resilient and like, hey, good to see you. Have a nice walk. Just did a little bit more power to it rather than, not as something you have to do, but if that's where you want to express your power, with a little bit more of noticing where it comes up for you. There are other aspects to that. For example, we don't necessarily live in a safe world. I don't know that humans have ever lived in a safe world, utterly safe, emotionally safe. Many of us have created worlds of our own and in our kinships that are much safer than anything we experienced or any of our ancestors experienced, at least in my memory. And if I'm more outgoing and friendly on out in the world, it can open. People can feel like that's an opening to try to get what they want. And if I don't feel resilient to say, "Hey, I'm just saying I'm saying hi," notice I start getting a little awkward. This is work for me right now. I need to have some language and some boundary and some energy that allows me to keep going if I don't want to have a conversation. And this applies, like if you want to post something on social media, if you're out on social media at all, you've probably seen someone that posted something that you really liked. It's like, oh, that really spoke to me, or oh, I love her creativity, and you saw a comment that was not nice, not kind of attacked it even from a direction. And you're like, what? Am I afraid to shine out on social media? Yeah, like, because it doesn't mean that I'm utterly suppressed, but I've come to realize that that's not a we space that has what I really like. Now, by contrast, the community center that we have has a different set of dynamics. If I post a work of art and somebody attacks me for it, I know that the circle will be like, hey, if it's not to your liking, then it's fine to say that. Hey, yeah, or not say it. Right? But to attack someone's skill or their expression or something like that, that's not within the we space that we're co-creating together. Because I am not, I have a role there. And if somebody goes against that, I know that there are people that space matters to them that wouldn't necessarily attack, I would hope, but would create, would seek to restore what the we space is about, which is about emotional freedom, not shooting on each other. We even encourage ourselves to not shoot on ourselves. And so that's a thing. And we're going to take our break here right after Noreen. Hi, Noreen.
Hi, Rick.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. I too grew up in a family and was told, I never really had any great trauma or horrible thing that happened to me, but I was always the good-natured, the nice one, the pretty one, the thin one. No
pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. And then my first memory of power over me was when I was in kindergarten.
Okay.
It was Easter time. We were making clay bunnies. I was in heaven. And Mrs. Reynolds came over, took my bunny out of my hands. She didn't really say anything, but as if to say, here, let me show you how that really needs to be done. And she commenced to finish and paint my bunny.
Okay.
And
what emotion are you feeling right now?
I felt like I was stripped of my own creativity. And it took me decades. We've worked together on my artistry. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I could even put the words outside of me that I'm an artist. You know, going from Mrs. Reynolds doing what she did. Oh, and by the way, my brother and sister each had her for kindergarten, and their bunnies looked like they were done by a kindergartner. Mine is the only one that looks like it was done by a 35-year-old.
As it was. Finished off.
And then later, you know, my dad discouraging me from taking art classes because you can't make a living.
Let's pause there, okay, and just tap because I want to get our break in here.
Yeah,
I've been discouraged from shining.
I have been discouraged from shining.
I have been discouraged.
I've been discouraged.
Side of the eye, Mrs. Reynolds, and so many others.
My dad, and so many others.
Under the eye. Discouraged from shining.
Discouraged from shining.
Under the nose. It feels like rejection or discouragement.
It feels like you're not good enough anyway.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Your power isn't okay right here.
My power isn't okay right here.
And that's been really hard to navigate.
It has been so hard to navigate.
The arm. At times I thought it was me.
Most of the time I thought it was me.
How empowering of me.
Empowering of me.
But it was really Mrs. Reynolds.
It was really Mrs. Reynolds.
Oh.
And you know what? I remember, I think it was one of our very first sessions that we had together, you and I had said something and you said, well, what do you mean it's not okay to toot your own horn? You know, and so yeah, I've been trying to toot my own horn because I deserve to. You know, I've done some good things.
And that goes to, I think one of the key takeaways for me about power, that we navigate these spaces growing up like a classroom that's run by a teacher. And that's their realm. They're the king or queen, the ruler over. And some homes are run the same, were run the same way. And those are spaces. And in those contexts, there wasn't freedom. Wasn't freedom to use the power in a certain way. In the circle that I'm co-creating, tooting your own horn is something I want more of. I believe that celebration matters. I believe that's a space where we can celebrate the emotional wins and even the emotional labors that we do, the changes that occur inside of us, the journey that we've taken, that this is crucial. It's crucial for our well-being. It's crucial for our thriving to have that. At least it is for me. Not everyone wants to be in a space where people celebrate. And there are people that dysregulate if somebody else has just done something good because, well, they can't handle that energy. Toot, toot, it's way too, even just that. Toot, toot, way too loud for them. They cannot handle that in their nervous system. And That's where learning to the skill of recognizing the relationships and the contexts and the we spaces that support different aspects of our power is a kind of savvy that, unlike the primal instinct of this is the little narrow world that I was born into, and I better learn how to navigate it, shut down the powers that I can't, there aren't any spaces for this, like free-spirited thinking. There are whole cultures and countries where free-spirited thinking will get you stoned, and not in a good way. So finding contexts where we can be artistic, and also cultivating them. As we go into the break, someone mentioned about, and I'd like to do some tapping on this, I'm afraid to shine as I am afraid of rejection and judgment. There are places that if you put out what you've done and you don't have a filter, you will get rejected, you will get judged, and what are you going to do with that energy? There needs to be a place for that to go, which isn't something that we have to cope with or adapt to, if that makes sense. I appreciate you and all that you've done to help co-create Thriving Now Circle. I see many faces here that do that, and I thank you all for being here. We're going to just pause the recording here. If you're watching the replay, please we're going to take a 7-minute break. So about 6 after. Welcome back. So we talked about being afraid of our power because we put something out and we got back discouragement or threats or punishment if it went against the rules of the people that had power over us. And that matters to our primitive brain. And for most of our ancestry, the truth is that we needed to either get along or deal with violence, or rejection, which meant being cast out. Like, you are such a bad fit for our tribe, you're out of here. So when someone brought up about, like, I'm afraid of my power and expressing it because I'm going to get rejected, I'm trying to find, or I'm going to get judged, which is an energy that our primitive brain is aware of. It's like, I am being judged. Am I being judged favorably, or am I being judged harshly? It's tender to realize that with everything that we've done around emotional freedom, that, hold on a second, with everything that we've done around emotional freedom, we still have a primitive brain, and it gets first crack at things like, oh, I'm being judged. I'm being rejected. But humans have evolved so that that's not the only place that awareness is going to be living. We have the capacity, through practice and through awareness and conscious skill building, to take that sensation, awareness, and do something different with it than just hide. So if I'm afraid of my power because I'm going to be rejected and judged, you're still in your primitive brain. Like, that's where that lives. The first thing we can do is tap to, I accept that I'm going to be judged. That usually doesn't come with a threat of death. side of the eye. I am going to be rejected under the eye, but that doesn't make me an outcast under the nose. People will judge me. Chin. I certainly judge other people. Collarbone. What if that's okay? Under the arm. People have their preferences. And they have things that repulse them. Ideas and art. Poems and music. Somebody loves it. Somebody hates it. What if that's okay? It doesn't feel okay to a part of me that remembers a long time ago. Or even that remembers last week. I want to be savvy with the reality of rejection and judgment and still thrive. What if I don't have to take it in quite so deeply? Take a deep breath. And what does it mean to not take it in quite so deeply? Well, to me, there's a preparation. When I'm working with someone that wants to be out there in the world more, just not just shine in their own studio, but also wants to be engaging and offering and even being assertive on some behalf of something that matters to them. There's some energetic preparation that is really helpful as part of the skill of being calm and confident. The skill of noticing that, look, rejection and judgment are important, just like status to my primitive brain. And by noticing when it comes in and moving the energy means it's not just about fight, flight, or freeze. It's about choice. Oh, feels like I've got to freeze. Feels like I've got to flee, hide. Oh, love you, primitive brain. I'm going to move this energy. My choice is to put it out there in ways that feel good to me, for the people that want to share that with me. Not the energetic of tapping is to acknowledge, accept that of course I'm going to pick it up here in my primitive brain, or here. Like my sensors are going to pick up, they're judging me and they're not happy. And to be able to move the energy. You do not have to tap to move energy. Tapping, I think, is a very natural way to move energy through your body and giving it a place like, look, I accept it, and it is not something that I want to shut me down. I want it to be a part of reality, but not the one that I'm focused on. It's a part of my reality. I just got that email. I just got, I said something that was a little edgy and 100 people unsubscribed. Guess what? It happened. Now, there's someone I really care about who has such a hard time with unsubscribes that the way that they tend to themselves is we turned off. I showed them how to turn off the unsubscribe emails that let them know when someone leaves. So it's quieter, right? And so like quieting the noise of people leaving or the like. Another preparation is, what does it mean when someone asserts that they reject it or reject, they may look at you and reject you. Okay. Right. What does it mean? And that and that it can be very helpful to go deeply into that. What does it actually mean to me if I put out something into the world, I express my power, I'm shining, like it really, like this matters to me, and somebody or someone's, or even a lot of someone's go, no, yuck, ew, gross, get away from me. What does it mean? The most powerful words that I've heard were from Seth Godin. They've stuck with me. That's okay. I didn't do it for you. I didn't create that for you. Clearly, I didn't create that for you. When you're talking about putting something out, knowing that people are going to judge it, because that's a part of our primitive brain too, with almost unavoidable. What does it mean for rejection and judgment? So then there's rejection and judgment that feels like it's there. It comes with a threat where they need you to be different, and that like preparation is, what is your boundary? Say, I didn't do it for you. You're asking me to do something that I'm not going to do. We should end this relationship. I'm going to block you. And so I don't even have to say that. Like, they're gone. If somebody writes something to me that is a personal attack, it happens, every year or so, maybe more rare. If it's not somebody that I have any relationship with, if one of you sent me something very personal that expressed something, I have a relationship with you all. Our right distance, right depth is closer. You're spending part of your life, the time and the energy. We're sharing this space. If you say something to me, like part of my preparation is people that matter to me may also express something that is a judgment or a rejection. If somebody out of the blue says, hey, I can't believe you used that S word on your workshop. You must be a horrible person to let a profanity come out in a professional context. Unsubscribe. If one of you said that, I would want to at least explain that part of freedom for me and something that I have found professionally helpful is that if people have to suppress their energy that comes out in whatever means it does, that's not violent toward others, but expresses an emotion using whatever language, I'm holding a space that where profanity is allowed. And if you need a space where profanity is discouraged actively, and where people that use profanity are told or are silenced, because that's not what that's, you find another context where that is right. So you see, like rejection and judgment are going to happen, and having a savvy about where we're going to put the energy. That goes with family members too, because I believe that each of us, I wrote down here before, like there's capacity. We spoke about, like, if you have a sister who cannot handle anger, to express anger toward that person is a sacred decision. You know that they're going to dysregulate about it because they've never demonstrated the capacity to handle it. And so your decision to express anger toward them, I consider a sacred decision with an awareness of the repercussions. If you choose in your sacred decision, like, I'm really angry and that person has no capacity to hear me, I know it. And so I'm going to do the empty chair routine. I'm going to sit in my living room and I'm going to express my anger with this person and pretend that they're right there. Or I'm going to get a coach, or I'm going to ask my best friend, hey, can you hold space for me? Do you have the capacity to hear how angry I am about this person, this situation, or something? We look for the capacity. We look for the context. It could be that your friend has the capacity to hear your anger, but right in the middle of work, if you're a work friend, or while they're cooking a meal is not the time. The context isn't right. And then there's consent, which is, are you saying yes to this? Are the people that are holding the space saying, yes, this is awkward or this is uncomfortable? Or wouldn't it be nice if profanity was never needed other than toot, toot, fuck yes? Right? Maybe you want to live in a world where people are not in distress, people are not being traumatized, people are not having to struggle with others who are uncaring, unkind, unlistening. But it's consensual for you to be there and to listen. If it's not consensual, maybe moving to a different, just temporarily, like I have people that attend circles and workshops, and sometimes a particular energy is too much for them, and they'll mute or they'll take a break and come back. I love that. That is so welcome here. Now, Kathy went to a group where once the meeting started, you weren't allowed to leave unless even if you were pooping yourself, like everyone knew it. If you came in there, you knew you were signing on for 2 hours and nobody was going to get up and leave. Now, that kind of space is a particular container. I won't consent to that. And so the spaces that I hold, you can come, go, leave, because that's what I'm wanting to cultivate. And the cool thing is, if you're a co-creator, you get to work with the other people that you're co-creating with and refine and enhance and do that. Often there are people, and Dieter, thank you for pointing out, like, you have a capacity to handle other people's anger. You have a lot of skill and you kind of know what to do with it. And in the context of your work, you told people, hey, if you have somebody that's so angry, give them to me. I have the capacity, and there's consent. Now, if you heard somebody dealing with an angry caller and you went and you took that caller from them or took that away from them, that's not consent. You might have the capacity and the context, you have the authority even, but it doesn't fit with consent. And so I think that as we look at, like, afraid of our power, I need a model that fits. Like, sometimes I don't have the capacity to listen to a long, drawn out story. And I own that. I'll say, listen, buddy, my brain can't track you right now. I can't listen to this story. I just don't have the capacity. I might have the capacity, but the context, like, hey, I'm driving in traffic right now and I'd love to listen to the story. And this isn't the time or place for it. And then there's the consent, like, this isn't my yes right now. There's a power in setting boundaries, and affirming that it requires a certain personal confidence and energy. So this is my skill set, is the capacity there. And that goes for, like, looking at your sister, your parents, if they're still around, like, what is their act? These people, we're not putting them down by saying, there's a 99.999% chance, meaning maybe for 7 minutes out of the entire year that they could be different, but there's a 99.999% chance that if I share something vulnerable with them, they're going to criticize me instead of hearing me. We can pause there and recognize I'm not afraid of my power here. I'm clear. This isn't the context for me. If, I find it so easy to write stuff on the center compared to writing it on Facebook. Why? Well, there was a time when it felt right to just say yes to every friend request. So I have 2,000 some friends and their friends. If I write something public out there, if I write something just to my friends and friends, if I write something just to my friends, that's a really big group of unpredictable people. The context sucks for a lot of things that I might want to share that are tender, like, oh, I'm writing this, or I'm doing this thing for my well-being. I put it out there. And so one of the things is that people can feel like, oh, I'm afraid of my power. I'm afraid of my power. In what context are you afraid of your power? If you were sitting there with Kathy and you wanted to share something really like a powerful dream of yours that you haven't been able to share with anyone in your family, she's one of the most encouraging people I've ever met. I feel utterly safe sharing a dream with her, knowing that it is held with a recognition that what's important to me is important to me. It's not to be like the idea, the little tiny idea. It's even a bigger deal if what they're putting out there is something like, this makes me cry, it matters so much to me. Who do you share that with? We may want to share it with a parent, but their capacity, it's not going to, the context of the relationship just may not be right. We're not afraid of our vulnerability in this case. That's part of the skill set of being with our power, is recognizing capacity. Is the capacity there? Well, seems to be. Or no, context. Is the context right? I'm not clear. Maybe I can check. Would now be a good time? Are you in a good space? I want to talk about something edgy, but we're here in this restaurant. Is that comfortable for you? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And then the consent. People that get my newsletter consent to be mailed to me. I make it very easy for them to unsubscribe. Somebody that rejects and judges me and says, oh, this guy is not for me. He is. Whatever it is, they are judging and rejecting me, but it is not, to me, I believe that it can land in a place of thank you for following your guidance, that I am not the one that you want to be spending time with around this subject or ever. What comes up for people as I'm sharing this? I'm looking and seeing. Someone said there's no comfort or emotional freedom in hiding. It only promotes fear and giving away your power. I can acknowledge that is very much their energetic experience. For me, sacred hiding is a thing. It's like I feel vulnerable. I feel tender. I'm not wanting closeness or exposure. It's more like sanctuary. Like when I feel like I need to hide, my place of taking that power is like, okay, actually, it's time for sanctuary. It's time for solitude. It's time to go within. It's like, oh, there's a lot of power in that. That's like the warm cauldron of soup in your soul, rather than that. Yeah, a great skill, not taking it so deeply. And again, like we're oriented with people that we've been around or that are really dear to us to like take in what they say. And I'm like that. I will notice though, if I take something in deeply that, you know, this actually has no real guidance for me. This doesn't activate or make me better or thriving. I may recalibrate right distance, right depth. And I, over my lifetime and my clients' engagements, I noticed that when you find that right distance, right depth with a person, then what they give you, even if it comes intimately onto your phone in a text message, there's a certain boundary isn't quite the right word. It feels like a right distance, right depth. So like, this person typically does not come with love. They come with something else. And so I can let them be them. It's like, this is really okay for me to let them have their feelings. I have mine, they have theirs. What's theirs is theirs. What's mine is mine. Well, then I can be in my own powerful reaction. Like, I'm really wanting more kindness in my life. I'm really going to put more energy. When I think that, like, I'm not getting this kindness from that person that I love, they're related or not, but, I'm not getting much kindness from them right now. They don't seem to have the capacity it's just not their nature. So I'm getting this other, I'm going to put my energy elsewhere. I set a boundary with my BFF, and she lashed out in anger. I was so shocked. So, when people are really close, this goes to the same thing. I believe that there's a skill. If I'm going to set a boundary with someone, and I'm doing it consciously rather than reactively or like in the moment, it's like I don't expect people to react to boundaries with anything other than primitive brain as an initial reaction. Myself too. Okay. It's just something I've noticed. Occasionally, that's not what happens. But I notice if my partner sets a boundary, like, I don't have time for that, or I don't have the energy. She doesn't say time. I don't have the energy for that. Like, what happens to me? Like, my initial reaction can be angry. Well, when are we going to have time? Like, okay, that happens on occasion. Now that I know that boundary setting is something that's healthy for us, like, I don't want her to take time and energy for something she doesn't have it for. I'm like, okay, thanks. Thanks for letting me know. It's important to me. We'll get to it. I trust us to get to it. So if we're not used to setting a boundary, it can be shocking that we get primitive brain back. Without going deeper into it, what I do if I get primitive brain back is like, yeah, I get that. That's they love me, and that's their primitive brain. She lashed out, didn't know what to do with the anger, may have even assumed that she's a bad person or something. And that was really shocking. Oh, that was so shocking to me. That's so not what our relationship has been about. And it was a boundary. And, I'm open to letting go of the shock from my system and being open to repair and clarity. The shocked is a really use for emotional processing. If we're shocked by something, it's a freeze response. If it keeps going around and around, it's definitely a freeze response. And I did just the first part of it of I'm open to letting go of the shock from my system, that she's human, I'm human. I needed to set the boundary. She didn't know what to do with that. It's not okay to be lashing out at me either. And she's my BFF. And I'm open to us finding a place to repair and restore and move forward. If one person comes out of shock and primitive brain, it often helps the other person. It's not guaranteed, but that's part of the skill set. Is I'm shocked. I can't believe. Yeah, tap tap. Accept the reality, humanity, and the not okayness of what they did that we needed to set the boundary for. The not okayness with being lashed in anger, and that, I'm open to the possibility that repair is possible when we have deep relationships. So if what you're tuning to is thinking about my marriage that I was rejected in, for the purpose of afraid of our power, so I had a marriage where I divorced, and part of the repair internally was, I was expressing this, and this. And these are things that I actually like about myself that were rejected by my partner, called unacceptable. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. And the repair can be, these are powers I want to find the right context and consent. And, if we were going along great for 20 plus years, so to speak, and we reached ahead on these things which were irreconcilable because my power wanted, needed, and flourishes when I express it a certain way. And that wasn't okay with my partner. The cleanup is to be like, I like this power of mine, and I bet other people will too. Like, I'm engaged in the lives of other people who are not just family members, and engaged as in, I love you. So many of you have been with me for so long. I know you. I know your family. I know what matters to you. It's really dear to me, and I hold that. That's a power, to be able to hold a group of people with love and sacredness. And somebody who wants a much more narrow container, that is going to be no, you can't do that. You think about what about your nature? Like, some people only can be partnered with a really positive person, right? Like, no negative. If you say anything negative, you're just attracting more of that into our life. Well, I would be a disaster. Because, I see things in the world that really are repulsive to me. I'm wanting to move the energy to cultivate something else. I don't tend to fixate on just the negative. There are times when I'm sick and time when I'm down. Anyone else here have bad days? Like days when that you're attuned to not the fruity sunshine? Sunshine is a power, but so is the darkness. And I've grown through dark nights of meditation and tears and things, and I would not be the person I am, who I like, if I hadn't been allowed to do that. So the power to feel emotions and to honor them and to be with them. It doesn't feel safe for me if somebody is lashing out at me with anger. My nervous system can't handle that very well. I need to take a pause and a distance so that they can kind of get regulated with someone else, and then I can hear and be with what's important to them. But Rick, directed anger at me is not something my nervous system at this point in my life can do. I bless you, Dieter. So like that's something that acknowledging that we also have limits of what we're powerful to be able to cope with or thrive with, I think is part of the ecosystem. And the preparation for being in my power is to recognize that, look, I've got some superpowers and I've got some real gaps. And probably everybody else on the planet does as well. And so that's where someone rejecting, I don't typically find it very helpful personally to reject a person. I can create distance because like their ecosystem, their world is not something that works for me. But the primitive brain rejects people. They go, you. If somebody's in their primitive brain, part of my prep for being in my power is like, okay, yeah, their primitive brain is barking at me like a small dog. I didn't do anything to the chihuahua. I was just walking happily down the street, whistling. Okay, I was skipping and whistling. The dog did not like that. And the dog doesn't want me around. Fine. I'm okay creating some space. Does that make sense? A lot of other messages. A lot of clarity around this issue of sharing myself with others. I do get sanctuary. It is necessary to set aside sacred time to simply be with oneself. I hear you. It is for me. I do know people that they're thriving and they get almost no sacred time to be with themselves because their energy and orientation is, it's hard for me to fathom being like that, but they are, and they're thriving, so as long as they're not demanding that I always keep the door open, that I'm allowed to have sanctuary time, we can exist in the ecosystem and even share intimate we space. The primitive brain has been a remarkable transformation for me. Oh, and we're over time. I apologize. I didn't set a time. The primitive brain, I'll retune. So we've touched on a lot of things here. Our experience of power includes the parts of us that are descended. We are an animal, and we have that in us. We look at that as sensory input. It may need to be consciously carried from the primitive brain, where it might want to fight or flee and hide or freeze and shock. We do what we can and what we're learning to do to bring that into our core, our consciousness, our presence, what we know and like and are cultivating within ourselves. And when we do that, the power first is recalibrated within our being. And that gives us a place where we can choose, we can be aware of the capacity of a space or a person for what we want to express, the power that we want to express and be in. We can look for the context of that we space, and is now the time for that? And not feel like we're suppressed, because we're aware of the fact that this matters to us, that expressing this matters to us. And if we don't know of a space right now, we'll go co-create one or find one where the context and capacity are there. And then consent, whether it's interpersonal, and with organizations and other things. by doing that, we, I believe, take this powerful energy that we have and have savvy with it. I was not raised, my father, for example, had a tremendous size and presence. His savvy with his power was really about the competition and winning in court. And he treated us at times like we were, people to win. Like, anyway, if we've not had it modeled, let's find other people that are creating spaces. Let's tune into spaces and look at, like, what's the capacity? What's the context? Can I do that here? And you can also reach out to the people that are the facilitators. If they consider themselves a student teacher or a facilitator of a space, or even the leader of a space, you can ask them, like, I would like to be able to express this within this context. Is that okay? Is that something that is welcomed? Is it not just okay, but is it welcomed? And when we start doing that, we can feel like, well, we've got consent from the space holders, and that can allow us to tune to them as ones that are helping to create the container. So thank you all so much for sticking with this and exploring. I just got asked, do we really need permission to speak our truth? It is not, freedom to me is not about permission. You are certainly free to tell someone to fuck off. All I'm saying is, all I'm saying. I am not aware of any context anywhere where someone speaking their truth does not have some kind of response and may have a reaction. If we're want to be unafraid of our power and our voice, it can come from thinking that the world should be able to take our truth and not react to it or respond in a way. And to find places where speaking our truth is so precious that the people that are holding the space respond with more openness, a sense of connectedness, and that our power joins and supports one another. That's what I would like to cultivate. And there are lots of contexts, there are lots of people without capacity to hear various aspects of my truth. And if I choose to share that with them, it may end the relationship. And that's a sacred decision for me. Perhaps that, receptive tribe, and even contexts, places where you could, like Kathy has said, she's got people that, her truth about movies are really like safe with these people, but her truth about sexuality, no, that's not what you talk about with these people. I don't consider that a deficiency, to recognize that there are people that you can share your love of Harry Potter with, and other people that if you share your love with Harry Potter with, it won't bring you closer. It will actually create a reactive departure, which might be good for you. It might be something you choose. So, thank you all. Bye for now.